Hello, vlog number 2. Uh, yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to say. Again, that's kind of the whole point of this sort of thing. It's like conversational. It does actually feel like I'm having a conversation with two people, but it doesn't feel like I'm having a conversation with myself. I think it's similar to the way, like, when you write in a journal, you you don't really feel like you're talking to yourself. I don't think that people would journal so much if they just felt like they're talking to themselves. Like the fact that like keeping a journal is an inherently enjoyable activity suggests that we don't just feel like we're talking to ourselves. I think anyway. I think there's a similarity between, you know, our culture um, tends to like look down. I look really pale right now. Like, I'm not sure I like this lighting. One sec. Oh, I look even paler. Uh, yes, that is good. I had pictures of kittens up on my screen. Wait, I don't know if I can show you. But I had pictures of kittens, which might have explained why I was so smiley when the video started. But they make me look like a ghost. So I'm gonna switch to my pitch black desktop to bring out my caramel complexion. Praying and journaling. I don't think people would journal so much if it just felt like we were talking to ourselves. I feel like, at least in my experience, when I write in a journal, I feel like it's almost like I'm not like I'm talking to the journal, like it's some like entity that I would say dear diary to. But like it definitely feels like something, like the words are being taken in. Maybe not consciously. Because like why would people journal? Why would we write our intimate thoughts and feelings down? Why would that feel so good? I unless we feel like we're sharing them. I think it actually does feel, maybe on an unconscious level, like when we commit our thoughts and feelings to paper, it's as if we're sharing them with this sort of unspeaking presence, maybe unconsciously, because I generally don't think like that we would write privately our like innermost thoughts and feelings unless we thought like something was receiving them, even if that something is like some sort of, you know, deeper part of ourselves. I'm pretty certain it feels like we are sharing our thoughts and feelings with something, maybe not consciously, but with something when we write them down. And I wonder if like that's what praying is addressing. Like, you know, when you know a like depressed teenager, aka me, like 6 years ago, writes down his thoughts and feelings in his journal, like in a really self-indulgent, like just really self-indulgently commits his thoughts and feelings to paper. Is he addressing the same thing unconsciously that like a devout Christian is addressing as they pray? Like, is someone who prays consciously addressing the same thing that a person who journals is addressing? I think it's the same thing, because like normally at the start of developing a journaling habit, uh, people feel quite awkward about writing. Like, we aren't we're just thinking of who will read this, who's going to see this, am I going to be embarrassed when I read back to this, in a few weeks or months or years. But when we keep up the habit and we commit to it, eventually we lose that sort of self-consciousness, and we just write and we really commit. It's like, does that mean we've switched from like addressing our like future selves to addressing this like, I guess, unspoken deeper part of ourselves, or maybe outside of ourselves, now that we've got past the initial self-consciousness, and we're now unconsciously addressing this same thing that someone who prays is addressing? Because when we write in a journal, like, we're not just like doing it to pass time. We want to get stuff off our chest. We want something to take away these feelings, to give us some space to breathe, like inside our minds. And yeah, isn't that what praying is doing? Like, we're either asking for something to be given to us. Maybe we're asking for maybe we're praying to God to save our ill relative, or maybe, so that's like asking for a request. And we can ask, I guess we can make requests of a journal, because we can try to figure out we can try to figure out solutions to problems in our life by journaling. So maybe you have an issue and you start writing down your thoughts about the issue, and you're just kind of hoping that some solutions announce themselves to you as you commit them to writing. And it's like the act of committing to writing is like putting us in touch with this like greater or deeper intelligence, which we can access while we were just in our heads. And I wonder if praying and journaling, like when they become like genuine, authentic expressions, I wonder if both of these are actually like addressing the same part of ourselves, or the same greater intelligence. It's just journaling is addressing it unconsciously, and praying is addressing it consciously and calling it God. I'm not going to edit out these silences in between words. My friend Tiffany suggested I do, but like, I don't really want to go for like the like hyper edited, like stimulating feel of most YouTube vlogs. I quite like the idea of just freestyling it and leaving in some mistakes or silences. Hopefully I have like a calm enough presence that the silence doesn't get too awkward. I mean, I'm quite enjoying it. Like, I'm feeling quite relaxed right now and quite peaceful. So I'm okay with the silence. I'm okay with it. What are you afraid of? What's in the silence that you're scared of? I guess that being okay with the silence is perhaps a direct result of meditation, because I've done that for quite a while. And that's basically just sitting in silence for fairly long periods of time. So yeah, maybe I wonder if meditation is the cure for being afraid of awkward silences. But also, like, I feel quite like, I feel drawn to doing this vlogging thing. Maybe if I didn't feel so drawn towards it, I wouldn't be so okay with this thing sitting here in between the words. Maybe it's a sign that this is my calling. I think I found, well, yeah, I feel I have found my calling work-wise, which is pretty cool. Feel like I can say, like, my heart wants to work in mental health social care, which is a division of social care, obviously related to helping people with mental health issues. So yeah, it's like going around to service users' houses and going to them instead of them coming to you. And you're like, imagine if you're like a psychiatrist and you have your mahogany decked out room with the big like reclining sofa, and you just kind of, I don't know what the psychiatrists do like in between clients, traditional psychiatrists with their big ass like fancy decked out rooms with massive libraries in. What do they do in like the time between clients coming in? Like, do they think about the client they just had? They like invite their colleagues in and then like bitch about the last client they saw and like take the piss out of like how he like unconsciously fancies his mum and is afraid of squirrels. Because that would not be cool. But yeah, like that's not what I'm doing. That's not what that's not what I feel my calling is. My calling is mental health social work, where I'll be going to them, to their houses, and just like, I guess just figuring out for them what they need help with, like internally, like what sort of stuff they need, and externally and what might make their life better. So that's the plan. It's just a matter of fucking job hunting, which I'm sure a lot of my friends will be going through right now. Perhaps you're job hunting and you're jobless and living with your parents, which can be quite a stressful time. Personal relationships can be familial relationships can be strained. Your parents have a pretty vested interest in you getting the fuck out of their house and getting a job. So yeah, it can be pretty stressful, but I think I'm managing. I think I've switched the way I work within the last year. Like I used to be really motivated by like my main motivating force would be anxiety, like behind all my like assessments and exams. Well, actually, anxiety would initially be like a demotivating force because I'd be anxious to the point of avoiding the thought of work and doing any sort of work. So I'd just become totally blasé and indifferent and avoidant. And then eventually the anxiety would become so overwhelming that I'd have to start doing work. And that worked pretty well for 13 years of education. But within the last year, I've switched my motivating force away from stress and anxiety to just doing things out of a place of wanting to do them, even if not necessarily wanting, but accepting that I have to do things, like, because no one really wants to sit for like fucking weeks in a library and revise. But if you can accept the fact, and if you can also accept that you are able to do it, like you're capable of doing it, like there doesn't actually need to be like any stress there, like maybe little bits, but like it is possible. Like I found like in my experience, it is possible to sit exams without stress, with very little stress, and still get good grades, like decent grades. And the defining factor in that is how present you are. Like, that sounds probably quite cliched, but it's like, it's fucking real. Like if you can train yourself to be present and like not lost in your thoughts, because that's where anxiety comes and stress. It comes when like you're not present, but your energy is focused on the future, either the future where you're sitting the exam and you don't know enough, or even further in the future where you've already sat the exam, you've already fucked up, your life is in tatters, and when your energy and attention is all in those thoughts, and you aren't aware of them as thoughts, because while we aren't mindful of our thoughts, while we're not consciously paying attention to our thinking, our body can't distinguish between thoughts and reality. While we aren't consciously paying attention to our thoughts and their content, our body can't differentiate between what is thought and what is real. Once you become mindful, once you become conscious of our thinking, then our body can see, oh, this is a thought. But while we're thinking, while we're lost in thought, while we're ruminating, that is, our body can't tell the difference between thought and reality. So while we're like revising for our exams and we're not paying attention to the content of our thoughts, we're not mindful, we're not conscious of our thoughts, and what our minds are creating is like an endless movie of like apocalyptic, catastrophic scenarios where you're homeless because you fucked up all your exams, and like you're homeless and like you're not very street savvy, like everyone's fucking, you've got your sleeping bag stolen like 3 times, and like you're really embarrassed because you see yourself as quite a fashionable and well-groomed person, and now you're homeless, and like that identity has collapsed, and like so you're just sat in the library, like in nice clothes, probably not very well groomed, because you're 3 weeks into the revision slog, but you're in a library in reality, but in your mind you're homeless on the streets because you fucked up all your exams. And because you're unconscious of your thoughts, because you're not being mindful of them, your body perceives that as reality. And the way to deal with the reality of being homeless is to activate the fight or flight response in order to fend off any people who are going to try and steal your sleeping bag. So you just sat like in a library, like fucking sweating. Your whole body is like coursing with adrenaline because like your body is ready to like fucking to face off like the sleeping bag thieves, but you're in a library, and that's when you get stressed. And the way out of that is to be present. Like it sounds perhaps overly simple, but that's because our minds don't want things to be simple, because our mind is like the root of all the anxiety. And it's like it doesn't want things to be simple. So the fact that like all that it takes for us to not feel anxious and stressed during like important periods, like preparing for exams and interviews, like the idea that all we need to do is be present, it's not like our minds don't like that. Like it doesn't sit well with us because we're so used to using our minds. But it is that simple. Like it takes a while of training yourself to be present before you can reach that. But it is possible. And like if you can do it for exams, you can do it for like interviews and approaching a guy or girl who you find really attractive. Trying to think of other scary situations. But yeah, you can apply it to any situation where like you're going to become anxious because you're thinking too much about the future, and then like when you're not present, your body mistakes those thoughts about the future for reality, and it produces anxiety as a way to prepare yourself for the imagined scenario which isn't happening, basically. And the way out of that is to become present. And how do we become present? Well, we make a habit of paying attention to our breathing. You don't have to make a formal meditation out of it. formal as in like you have like you have a set amount of time each day to do it. It doesn't need to be like a set amount of time, but if throughout the day, whenever you remember, you just pay attention to what it feels like, to breathe. Like maybe you put your hands on your chest, which is what I'm doing now, but like you can't see it. Maybe you put your hands on your chest to bring your attention towards the sensations of breathing. You don't have to use your hands, but you just become aware as viscerally and intensely as possible of the sensations of breathing and what it feels like to breathe. Because like, how often do we think about what it feels like to breathe? Even though breathing is like, we take breathing for granted. Like fucking hell, if you hold your breath, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it on this vlog because even I have standards. But if you hold your breath for a very long time, ideally when you've on the out, so you out breath and then hold your breath, and like within seconds you're in a lot of pain because breathing is fucking essential and it keeps us alive, and we don't pay any attention to it. So as well as like our breath being like a way out of being suffering excessively and needlessly, as well as the breath being a way out of like needless anxiety, it's also like keeping us alive. Like we are a few breaths away from death at any point. Like I know that's pretty dark, but like I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just like, we don't take our breath for granted at all, because even though it's like the way out of anxiety, is into the present moment through the breath, or a way out of it, and like it just fucking keeps us alive. Like it's our lungs have worked for like however many, like 2 decades. You know, we should thank our lungs by paying attention to them, and they will reward you for that by allowing you to be in the present moment more. And when that happens, there's a lot less anxiety in your life. When that becomes the habit, when being aware of your breathing and being in the present moment becomes a habit, there's a lot less anxiety in your life. And you're no longer having this situation where like you're sat in a library, but like your mind and your body are 2 years in the future, and the you in that future is homeless and is being attacked by sleeping bag thieves. So like you never get those sort of situations where like your physical reality is reflecting an imagined scenario, because as we thank our breath, as we thank our lungs by paying attention to our breathing as a habit, we see those like catastrophic scenarios as just thoughts. And when we see that scenario as a thought, our body doesn't produce the physical response it needs to deal with the imagined scenario, and then the anxiety starts to dissipate, or it will at least decrease somewhat. So yeah, like you don't have to start a meditation practice for that. Like if you just make a habit of paying attention to our underappreciated, underrated lungs, then they will reward you by helping you feel less anxious and more in the present moment. Cool, I'm going to wrap that up there.